When it comes to my childhood, Disney dominated my film choices. From Snow White to Home on the Range, I saw almost all of the animated feature films from that time period at least once. Now, if you go back and watch those films again, you might notice that a bunch of the voices all sound kinda similar. That's because Disney has always had a habit of reusing their voice actors across years or even decades. Now, I should say that for this list, I want to only include actors who voiced at least 3 different characters in a Disney film. And I'm not counting any Pixar films either. This will mean that people like Catherine Beaumont, George Sanders, Eleanor Audley, Cheech Marin, John Ratzenberger, and Ava Gabor sadly don't qualify. But honestly, even with these limitations, this was a very hard list to make. But make it I finally did. So here are my top 5 recurring Disney voice actors. Number 5. Sebastian Cabot. This one was hard to pick because it came down to 2 very deep-voiced British actors. But while Tony Jay did provide one of the greatest villains that Disney's ever produced, I can't help but pick Sebastian Cabot. While Cabot voiced fewer characters than other people on this list, they still emerge as unique from each other. Sir Ector and Bagheera are on opposite sides of the coin when it comes to being guardians to the main character. Sir Ector only begrudgingly cares for Arthur and gives him a demeaning nickname to boot. Bagheera, meanwhile, is endlessly patient with Mowgli and constantly looks after him no matter what. Honestly, I didn't even know they were voiced by the same guy until I looked it up. But I think the most memorable role of Cabot's career is that of the narrator for the stories of Winnie the Pooh. A role like that takes full advantage of Cabot's amazing voice, and it also lets him deliver a wide range of emotions depending on what he's talking about. And if you re-watch Winnie the Pooh, a lot of the atmosphere comes from the narrator, and all the in-jokes regarding the fact that it's a storybook. It really wouldn't be the same without Sebastian Cabot. Number 4. Pat Buttram. This was another tough choice. It was actually a toss-up between 2 signature voices who appeared alongside each other in 2 different Disney films. But while I seriously considered Phil Harris, I ended up going with Pat Buttram. Not only did Buttram have an equally recognizable voice, especially with that southern twang, but his characters were diverse. It didn't matter that his characters sounded alike, they were different enough that you didn't even think about it. Buttram's career with Disney lasted decades, but when I think of his Disney work, 3 characters come to mind. And weirdly enough, they're all canines. Napoleon from the Aristocats is a funny side character who has almost nothing to do with the main plot, while still being funnier than the main plot itself. Meanwhile, the Sheriff of Nottingham is equally funny, but also a despicable villain as he abuses his authority to no end. He's a great foil to Robin Hood. But then there's Chief from Fox and the Hound. At first glance, Chief is just another villain to chase Todd around and drive a wedge between Todd and Copper. But the story gives him a 3-dimensional character. He's not chasing Todd because he's evil, he's doing what he was raised to do. And while he does become a sort of father figure to Copper, his inflated ego gets in the way, and also gives him some funny moments in the film. If ever you hear a good old boy twang in a Disney film, safe to say that you have Pat Buttram to thank for it. Number 3. Verna Felton. Even in the world of voice actors with diverse talents, I was surprised by Verna Felton's resume. She voiced characters in 6 different Disney films. 6. And it's not like they were all the same kind of character either. Felton was able to give us characters that ranged from motherly to terrifying, snobbish to selfless. Flora and the fairy godmother are loving guardians, while the Queen of Hearts and Aunt Sarah are both over-the-top villains that we love to hate. And while I never thought about it as a kid, it's still impressive how she was able to voice all these different characters so effortlessly. Weirdly, she was also one for voicing elephants. She voiced 3 different elephants in her Disney career. 2 of them were in the same movie. And even they were all different from each other. You have Dumbo's long-suffering mother, you've got the completely egotistical and authoritative matriarch, and you've got the equally authoritative Winifred, but in her case, it's hilarious when she takes charge. It's safe to say that Verna Felton's range was among the strongest of anyone in the Disney lineup. Number 2. Sterling Holloway. When it comes to signature voices, Sterling Holloway is right up there with the best. It's also safe to say that he's played some incredibly diverse roles. He went from friend to foe in a heartbeat, and even though his high tenor voice is very recognizable every time, he still managed to infuse a unique personality onto each one of his characters, just like with Pat Buttram. As a kid, I never really made the connection that Roquefort the Mouse, the Cheshire Cat, or Mr. Stork all sounded alike. Each one of them was a unique individual. But I think it's safe to say that the roles of Winnie the Pooh and Kaa the Snake are the twin jewels in Holloway's crown. Just those 2, side by side, shows you just how much an actor can create with just the smallest changes in their voice. Sterling Holloway didn't need a 4-octave range to create memorable characters. But that said, when it comes to the supreme overlord of Disney voice work, there can be only one. And that number 1 is Jim Cummings. The master himself. From the moment of researching this list, I knew that Jim Cummings was going to be number 1. But what really puts Cummings over the previous 5 names is the fact that he doesn't just do diverse roles. He can completely take over roles from someone else without hardly anyone taking notice. Not only did Cummings voice Razul, Ed, and Ray, not only did he take over Winnie the Pooh after Holloway's death, but he made a habit out of providing his voice to sing for a character which was being voiced by a completely different actor at the same time. He did it twice in Pocahontas, but the most famous example is when he sung half of Scar's villain song when Jeremy Irons' voice gave out during recording of the first half. Even the nostalgia critic didn't recognize the difference between Irons and Cummings' voices, and he had to correct himself, and as a result paid tribute to Jim Cummings in the process. And really, when you not only create unique characters but can also successfully embody pre-existing characters, you know you're a talented actor. That's why I put Jim Cummings at the top of my Disney voice list.